Well, that'll get your attention.
Yeah. This is David with EV World News, where we talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm here with Bill Moore today. I've been out for a week, and so Bill and I haven't been on. It's been 2 weeks since we last did an episode together, so it's good to be back on here. Anyways, let's start off with talking about the first Biden-funded electric car charging station opens, and it looks like this is in Ohio.
Yeah, I picked that story because in the lead up to that, I've seen actually quite a number of articles that were, I guess, critical of the fact that the government spent all this money on all these chargers and there are none, right? Where are they? And I think sort of the inference is that either A, the government is dragging its feet, or B, it's all a con or some, I don't know. But anyway, this article says that the very first one to be funded and to actually, go live and start taking traffic and, charging electric vehicles is a one just west of Ohio, just off of Interstate 70. It's at a pilot truck stop, and it's got its funding from the Biden National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Bill or Act. And I thought and what's interesting about the article is they explain in that a little bit about why it's taken 2 years for us to get to the point where we actually have one opening. Because I think sort of
Wow.
the impression is that, well, the government hands out this money and 6 months later, this thing should be built. Well, if all of the pieces were in place to make this a sound investment for the nation, sure. But the problem is that a lot of the pieces of that puzzle had to be worked out. For example, whose charging system are you going to use? Right? That's been up in the air.
NACS or CCS?
Yeah. So whose charging system are you going to? More importantly, whose billing system are you going to use? Because as you probably let people, charge at public chargers, there's any number of providers out there, and not all of their systems are the same. So how do you resolve that? How do you identify where is the best place to put these? Because the federal government didn't mandate, I want it X, Y, Z positions, right? The federal government went to the states and they said to the states, you help us pick the best locations for your citizenry. Where is the best place? So then states had to get together groups of people and engineers and public comment and try to figure out, where do we want all these stations located? Where are they going to be the most effective investment for our locality and for the nation as a whole? That doesn't happen overnight. I mean, some people would like to have it happen overnight, but it doesn't happen overnight. If you want a sound investment, it's going to take time. So it took time for this all to fall into place. Now, I think once the Ohio system is up and running, and I'm sure there'll be some bugs still to be worked out, we can begin to move at a much higher pace because we've got this all in place. So that's the reason I picked this, not because it's a huge significant issue. It just illustrates that there is a deliberation, a sound, fiscally responsible deliberation that's taking place. Would we like it to happen faster? Oh, absolutely. Do we want it to not be a waste of our money? That's even more important.
Well, one of the things a lot of people don't really understand about government is that government, for a lot of these things, because I've dealt with government and real estate development for years, is that you have these meetings that come up once a month for these planning meetings.
Yep.
And often those planning meetings either get canceled or the stuff gets pushed to the next month.
Yep.
And another month is wasted. And so you typically have all this time and investment into these things that keep getting pushed down the road and down the road and down the road. Sometimes people wonder why stuff is so expensive. And a lot of this is because in these processes, you have it trickling down from the federal government. The states have to apply to get this funding spent in their state.
Yeah.
And then people in the state might only meet on this topic once a month.
Yeah.
And then it goes on for months and months and months while people argue as to, like you were saying, whether it be NACS or CCS style chargers, which is Tesla versus the rest of the world, essentially. And then, to see where, you know, these things are going. And the intent was to give money to all 50 states to deploy fast chargers near federal highways designated as alternative fuel corridors. And it's interesting. Once the highway charging network is complete, states can use the remaining funds to deploy chargers elsewhere.
Yeah.
But it is going at a slow pace. But I suspect now that there's one in, you're probably going to, within the next 12 months, you'd probably see, units in all 50
Yeah.
states.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't take much more. 26 states have made an effort to spend their money, according to the Joint Office of Energy and Transport, which was created to facilitate the EV transition. 17 are in the process of soliciting bids. 7 others have issued conditional awards for stations worth 101 million. Ohio and Hawaii are the furthest along, but only Ohio is up and running.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Under an overhead canopy. To
Yeah.
the
It's a,
fast.
it's a, you know, it's a, it's sort of, it's a, it looks like a typical pilot truck stop, except instead of having diesel dispensers there or gasoline dispensers there, you've got, so, it's beginning to happen. I just wanting to emphasize the fact that, we want our money to be spent responsibly. I can go off on another tangent about the negative impressions or negative reporting that's happening because of the ProTrader electric bus. The bankruptcy there. And everybody. I mean, I just saw a story today saying, Biden and how they Biden favored. I think was the word Biden favored electric bus manufacturer goes into bankruptcy and leaves a trail of woe behind it, kind of a thing. It's sort of it's just a replay, attempted replay of the Solyndra or Solyndra, was that it? The solar company that Obama quote financed, didn't of course, but it's that kind of play. So.
Well, Solyndra had some questionable stuff with Harry Reid's son, I believe it was. So that made it a little questionable. But that being said, ProTrader didn't really receive money from the Biden administration.
No.
They took some PPP money, which was payroll protection money, but that
Right.
wasn't the same thing. And so that's a little bit of a disingenuous argument for these people to be really criticizing ProTrader.
Well,
ProTrader
it's
really needed some stimulus.
yeah.
Okay, they didn't really get, as far as I can tell, they didn't really get a whole lot of stimulus to try to make it go, because they tried doing hydrogen fuel cell buses and all electric buses,
Yeah.
and they just can't compete with the Chinese.
Yeah. That's when you look at who's manufacturing the buses in the world. It's the buses in the world are being manufactured mostly in China. When I went to China the second time in 2002, my host there, who's a local Chinese businessman, entrepreneur, took me over to actually, it was a Chinese army base, literally a Chinese army base, where they were utilizing an assembly facility to build electric buses that were going to use his company's large format. And we're talking batteries this big around. We're not talking, Tesla-sized batteries. We're talking batteries literally that big around for their electric buses. And the goal was to have those buses ready for the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. But you look at who's building, a vast majority of the buses in the world. It's China.
Right.
I just posted a story today about New Zealand, and they're kind of revamping and redoing their bus system there. Whose buses are they using? Chinese buses, So yeah, so you got this little company, going up, basically, you talk about state funded. I'm sure those Chinese companies are getting some kind of assistance, and the fact that they've got ridership. You look at
Right.
our buses. You look at our buses here in this country, and typically they're nearly empty. Particularly, here, unfortunately, here in Omaha, when I've seen them, they've been carrying one or two passengers at most. It's just because everybody has a car. When I was in Beijing that year, we were going down Chunong Boulevard, which is the boulevard that runs in front of the Forbidden City, the big
Mhm.
portrait of Mao on it. And those buses were jammed with people, literally their faces up against the windows. They were so full because they've got, not that many people with cars, and you've got millions and millions of people who need transportation, and they're using those buses and subway system. So they had something, they're going to be successful. Whereas here, it's always, historically, since the invention of the cheap automobile by Henry Ford, it's always been not a particularly money making enterprise to run a public transit system in this country.
No, it hasn't. I mean, you look at
Once,
how passenger trains haven't done well. There's starting to be some in, you know, like I've done a video about it before on some of the ones in Florida are start where the driving is getting more congested. Some of those have become popular, but it's a difficult situation to basically make buses or passenger trains work out here in the United States. People really like to be in their own car. We like our
yeah,
privacy in the United States, and
and,
that's
and the
part.
and the flexibility it gives us. I want to go to the store now. I don't want to wait for the bus service to come by. So
No, it's interesting. I know we have 6,000 electric school buses in the United States. And I don't know how many public transit buses, but I think China has something like 500,000
oh
electric
yeah,
buses.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
crazy how many
yeah,
electric buses they have in China.
yeah.
And it's just hard to fathom what a difference that is. But it's interesting though from that article that only 23 states, was it, had actually 26 states have made an effort. So 24 states haven't even made an effort to spend their share of the money
Yeah.
on the
They
charging stations.
as far as I know, I think they all have submitted plans. All 50
Okay.
states, all 50 states have submitted plans. Some are obviously further along than others with whatever the next steps are in the plan.
Yeah, the article goes on to say some of the sites chosen by states require new transformers to be put up. That
Yeah.
can take months. I
Yeah.
mean, or a year.
Yeah.
Local construction permitting can take 6 to 12 months, but I know from my own experience, man, getting the electric company to do anything or put in a transformer, that's a pretty huge deal.
And
Um, it-
and it's also, there's we don't I've heard that there is not a huge backlog of transformers available. That the lead-in time to get transformers can be, months, if not years, that are on back order.
nice. Well, anyways, I just thought it's interesting. 158,000 public chargers already in the United States at 60,000 locations. 37,000 fast chargers. When they talk
We're
about
get
public char
we're getting
when they talk
there.
yeah, no, there's no question. 37,000 fast chargers. That's, you know, that is certainly building up some. Now let's go ahead and let's talk about the COP28. Now that this was held over in the Middle East, what
Yeah.
in the UAE, I think?
Yeah, it's in United Arab, it's in Dubai. So yeah. And that's been going on for over a week now. The idea, of course, was to pick up where COP27 left off, and so on, going back into time, trying to come up with some kind of an international consensus on how to basically save the planet from, the fever that we are generating by our consumption of fossil fuels. And of course, the critique of this particular conference has been the fact that the guy heading it is also the head of the nation's oil industry. So there's been and there's comments have been made that there are something like over 400 oil industry lobbyists that have shown up for the conference. And you're holding it in one of the richest oil producing and gas producing emirates in the world. You've got the guy heading it, runs the oil company there in that nation. And you've then got all of these lobbyists for the oil industry coming in, trying to make sure that nothing is enacted that might endanger their business. I mean, you were just talking about it, right? We reduced our oil consumption by driving electric vehicles by 1.8 billion. Was it billion? I think
million barrels. 1.8
million barrels a year.
Barrels per day. No, per day.
But we still burned more of that. That number's actually gone up. And they're talking about, I think I have something that I posted. I don't remember the exact
From this time
number.
in 2022, we're up 2.1 million barrels of oil production per day from a year ago. Yet at the same time, the need for oil has been reduced by 1.8 million barrels per day, which means that without the electric vehicles, it would have gone up 3.9 million barrels per day from last year. And it's just that there's that much more transportation, that much more of the world is motorized. And I think it represented about a 5% net increase in fossil fuel usage over the year before.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is even with that greater demand, the prices have been falling a little bit.
Yeah, that's what is it? I think it's been down like 20 cents in the last week, something like that.
So that's been interesting kind of to see. And even with the turmoil in the Middle East, it's it's kind of tapered off. But that it is interesting to see. And what is it? So fossil fuel companies at COP28 are projected to produce 25 billion barrels of oil this decade.
Yeah.
That's a lot of oil.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to see, though, you see like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with their deep investments into Lucid and to produce, electric cars in Saudi Arabia. Um, you know, uh, some of these companies, whatever, they're trying to at least show they're doing something because to a certain extent, they still have obligations to their own citizens or shareholders.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, there are sound economic reasons why they take the actions that they do. So I mean, I can understand that, but in the larger scope of things, the larger picture of things, they're doing their people as much harm ultimately as they are the rest of the planet.
This is interesting. Al Gore wrote that COP28 is on the verge of complete failure and that the draft looks as if it was written by petrostates word for word.
Well, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you expect? That's their bloodstream, and you're asking us to go in there and and have them cut their wrists. I mean, the debate throughout this conference has been: do we phase down oil or do we phase out oil? Right? And to phase down doesn't necessarily jeopardize their revenues and their future, ability to borrow money and all those things. Whereas phase out, as one article pointed out, to phase out would send the signal globally that these investments are going to be worth nothing someday. And so this whole fight has kind of been between, do we use the term phase down or do we use the term phase out? The guy heading what is it, Al-Aba or something like that. The guy heading it, he was in favor of phasing down phraseology, whereas guys like Gore and the head of the United Nations and the Pope is
Yeah.
more in favor of the term, phase out. So
Yeah.
I don't.
So
I mean,
algebra.
yeah, algebra. Yeah, I don't see anything positive coming out of this. I think I agree with Al Gore that it just, it had the cards stacked against us. Just had the cards stacked against it.
Let's see here. Another article here on the same topic. Governments must take drastic action. Let's see. Just a week before COP28, global one-day temperatures breached the 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit warming
Yep.
point for the first time. Short-term data, but it's another reminder the world is falling woefully short of meeting the goal of preventing a 2.7 degree Fahrenheit rise. We're moving from global warming to global boiling.
Yep. Yeah, we're gonna. Look. You hear you watch our local weather forecasts and things, and all the meteorologists, our local TV stations are talking about. We're in a serious drought here, and we really can use some moisture. And we haven't had. We're. And the minute you try to link that to changes in global weather patterns, what we would call, global warming. The minute you try to do that, you literally get on a death list. There are weather forecasters here in the Midwest who have been threatened because in their forecasting they have talked about climate change. That's how politicized something that should never be politicized. That's like the guy, telling I'm going to kill you, the doctor, because you just told me I have cancer. Huh? So yeah, it's a problem, and we're not doing. COP28 is not going to. Well, I take that back. There is one ray of hope, and they did agree to cap methane emissions and spend a lot of money on going out and capping, wells and things like that, and flaring. Put a stop to that kind of thing, because methane is obviously a much more toxic. Methane, much more long-lasting global warming gas than is CO2 itself. There's more CO2 than methane, but methane's more serious. So that we did get an agreement out of that to actually take and do something about controlling the release of methane. But that being said, as the oceans are warming, do you know what methane hydrates are?
I know a little bit about methane. I know people who use methane to power their manufacturing facilities.
Right. But do you know what methane hydrates are?
I do not.
Methane hydrates there are cracks in the ocean bottom, which allows methane to come up from below the Earth's surface, but it's so cold and the pressure's so hard down there, so high, that it never actually reaches the surface. It actually freezes into clumps of frozen methane.
Okay.
The problem is as we're warming the oceans, that methane is now starting to release. And that's becoming a concern. That's a feedback loop. Once you get it started, it's going to be awful hard to control.
Well, that'd be a problem with the methane.
Yeah.
That's not methane they can capture to use
No, that's not methane you can capture. No.
No, because the ones I know that are using methane they're capturing is coming out of garbage dumps.
Well, yeah, we do that here.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you can see there's even some methane exhaust pipes when you go along Dodge down. There's a few other places around town. You can see, those upside down J pipes for the methane. And most people don't know what those are, I don't think, but that's what they are.
I assume that's
very many places.
Yeah, that's leaking from the sewage system.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
We need
I've never.
so.
never been concerned enough to check. I just assumed that there may have been like a dump at some point in history in
Mm,
those areas, but who knows?
yeah. Well, I'm
That's
sure there's somebody out there knows. We don't.
right. All right. So
Yeah.
you wanted to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the Cybertruck.
Yeah, let's finish up with that. A huge event. Everybody's been anticipating this since the truck was announced, and shown 4 years ago. And the reaction has been, as you would expect with anything attached to Elon Musk anymore, there's been, a wide spectrum of responses to it. So you've got people that an example is Sandy Monroe, who was there at the reveal and has been involved in actually helping with some of the engineering on the truck, who's just absolutely in love with it,
Right.
particularly because of all the innovations that have been put into that truck. I mean, they are amazing. The stuff those engineers have done is just groundbreaking, particularly the jump from the 12-volt system that's been around for a century to the new 48-volt system, which allows all kinds of really incredible ways to control and monitor the electrical system, all the systems on the car, as well as to reduce the amount of cabling. Huge reduction in the amount of cabling. He says, if you're looking at, the typical, 12-volt cable, you're looking at something, at least that thick. But if you go to the 48-volt system, it's more like your little pinky, and even smaller than that. Um,
Right.
so there's several hundred pounds reduction in the weight and the amount of cabling that goes into the car just because of that change to 48 volt. The other side of the equation is the fact that this people are concerned about I think when Elon made a comment, if you're ever in a crash, you're going to win. That kind of a comment, because this thing is so well, it's like a tank. He says it's like, it's like a Blade Runner future type of thing. And the problem, of course, is, well, that's all good and well if you're the passenger, but what if you're in the other car, or what if you're on the bike or the motorcycle, the motor scooter? So there are issues, concerns about the safety standards that have been built into the car that obviously favors the passenger, but doesn't do a lot for, in terms of looking out for the public interest. So it's just interesting. I mean, personally, I wouldn't own one, but then there are 2 million people out there at least who said, yeah, I'll take one. I want it. Apparently, really drives well. It's got great handling in it. There's a video posted that Sandy Monroe did from Monroe Associates, where he sits down with 5 of the executives and talks about the engineering and the things that went into the car. And they really, I mean, it's an amazing piece of technology, no doubt. Styling wise, it doesn't do anything for me. But in terms of is this the future we're going? I don't know. We'll have to see it. It's not an easy vehicle to manufacture, for what I hear.
I was talking to somebody in New Zealand that was one of the first 10 Tesla owners in New Zealand. He's waiting for his Cybertruck to arrive, and he
Yeah.
never would have ordered a pickup truck. He's only buying it because it's a Tesla.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of interesting, because one of the interesting arguments is you're not taking Chevy Silverado and Ford F-150 buyers to buy Cybertrucks. You're taking people who wouldn't normally own a truck that want
Yeah.
this because it's a unique looking Tesla, and they're driving it more because of it think of it more as an SUV than they're worried about it
Yeah.
as a truck itself. And
Yeah.
that's quite an interesting piece.
It has its engineering pluses and it's had its engineering shortfalls. The interesting thing that is interesting, though, is there's speculation that truck and what they have learned from engineering and building that truck is going to set the pattern for what becomes the Tesla Model 2, I guess we would call it. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
I've seen some Tesla Model 2 deniers. that they don't believe that the Model 2 is ever going to come out because they said that there's no way Tesla can make a $25,000 electric
Yeah,
car or something like that. And the truth is they're doing it in Europe. So, um, and now they've got this gigacasting thing that's going to save several $1,000s on
yeah,
production of the cars. I don't see why they can't,
yeah.
you know.
Well,
And Musk is probably the wrong person to try to tell him you can't do this.
yeah. Sandy, I don't know. You got to watch Sandy Monroe if you want to get some inside look at this stuff.
Mhm.
But he had one of the very first interviews that Elon did after revealing, the truck reveal last week was to talk about what's beyond the Cybertruck. And Elon said that basically this technology is serving as the basis, and they already have the Model 2 fairly far along in the engineering, apparently. So we'll see. I think he'll bring it out. I don't have any doubt about that. Will it look like a cross between a Model Y and the Cybertruck? Very possible. Very possible.
I don't know.
And
I wasn't thinking of it as a looking kind of like an SUV type of thing. I was assuming it was just going to be a little bit smaller car than the Model 3 because the Model 3 isn't, it's tiny, but you could still get four people in it. You know, thing is, you can get Model 3s as a rental, from Hertz. And the
Mhm.
only thing is getting luggage in the damn thing. So they don't have a whole lot of space for luggage.
Yeah.
So I don't know how small a Model 2 is going to be, but I just assuming it's going to be a little smaller than that, where maybe you could only get children in the back seat and then, you know, probably still not a whole lot of luggage. Of course, you got the frunk space too,
Right. Right.
if depending on how they design that, but it is an issue that you just
Yeah.
don't have a whole lot of storage space in a Model 3.
I think
So,
when the Model 2 gets revealed, I think like when they revealed the Cybertruck originally, there's going to be some jaw drops.
oh, I'm sure, and it'll be interesting. I found one of our articles talking about the Reddit co-founder says a Cybertruck is the first vehicle that feels comfortable to drive as a tall person, but the
Yeah.
article manages to never say how tall the guy is.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, how
So
tall is he?
that's an important piece of information they left out of the article. It's always kind of amazing when they write something like that, and then they leave out that kind of information. So
Yeah.
apparently, I need to
Go on to Google and Google the guy and see if it mentions how tall he is. I mean,
right.
you're a tall guy, so you'd be the standard by which to judge that.
Yeah. Oh, he's married to Serena Williams. Interesting.
Well,
Okay.
now we can find out, if you get a photo of them standing next to each other, that'll tell you. Because Serena's a pretty tall woman.
Yes. Let's see. Oh, he's 6'5".
All
Okay.
right. So he's
Yeah.
taller than you.
Yeah, he is taller than me. Well, what's funny? I was telling you, I have a 6'5" friend who other day we were playing tennis. We got done, and he was driving a Chevy Bolt, and I was like, "Dude, you can fit in that?" He goes,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I do okay."
Yeah.
It
Good for
really
him.
has kind of a high roof, and he
Yeah.
goes, "Well," he goes, "It's my wife's car," but
Yeah.
he was just driving it that day, and that was you know kind
Well,
of interesting.
we'll have to take you a ride in my Fiat 500 because when
Yeah.
I get in it, and I'm 5'10", probably with age I'm 5'9" now, and I can feel the roof against my head. So
Oh,
I
geez.
assume you'd have to ride like this.
Yeah, I've driven a few cars where my head was wedged into the headrest and the ceiling, and it's not something I'd want to have all the time, that's for sure. Uh, but
But you could drive mine because mine has a sunroof.
There you go. Yeah,
So
so
we
you're
could
driving
put the
this
sunroof back and you could sit up here.
as long as it's not snowing, right?
As long
Yeah.
as it's not snowing. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's funny? It's not that it's really that cold here. It's so windy during the winter. If we didn't
Mm.
have the wind, it wouldn't be so darn cold here all the time. But who knows?
Well,
Maybe with a little,
that's the Great Plains.
well, maybe with a little global warming, it won't be so bad here in a few years.
Well, I saw years ago there was a prediction that with global climate, it's already changing because the Department of Agriculture has already revised the planting map. We've got a map that shows the zones for planting, and that zone is shifting north. And we now have armadillos starting to move north, which typically were down in this, warm Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas.
Right.
They're coming further north. So there was a forecast that we would, I think, about this time, or within the next decade or so, we're going to have the same climate as Oklahoma used to have.
Huh. Well, that'll be different. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, anyways,
If you're looking for real estate, I am predicting that at some point you'll want to buy property that's now on top of that has a glacier on top of it in Greenland.
there you go.
Because
I
there ain't
really,
gonna,
yeah, I sometimes wonder, from the Viking sagas, Greenland wasn't a sheet of ice when they were,
no.
back then, and it iced over
Well,
since.
it was there, but yeah, but it that was during there was a brief warming period, and then that lasted. I think it was what was it, a couple hundred years, something like that, and then they of course had
Right,
to later abandon it because it went back to the
being
normal
cold.
cooling down period. So
Well, anyways, we're not going to
okay,
solve
that's enough
anything today.
blathering.
Yeah, good show today. Good show today.
Yeah, it was fun.
People, I appreciate everybody for listening in, and please comment if you'd like to, you know, have us discuss some other topics. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end the show.